had many great takeaways from reading this book. The first comes from the very first chapter when it discusses how heart attitudes direct behavior and how important it is that we understand that as parents. It states that your concern is to unmask a child's sin by helping them to understand how to reflect on their heart and that they have strayed, and that leads them to Christ. And I really think that that's important, to just understand that everything that they do has not only a consequence, but it also has a lasting effect on them. And sometimes it can be something small, like they wrote on the wall with a Sharpie, and when they're 20, is that really going to affect them as, a growing adult and as a follower of Christ? Probably not, but it's important that in every situation that we understand what they've done and just get to the heart issue with that. And then I also loved, there was a chapter when it talked about spanking, and that was something that I believe to be something that we need to do, and I thought that before I read the book, but I loved how the book just really pointed to how that's what God's called us to do, and although sometimes it's hard and it's not what people want to do, it's what we're supposed to do as Christians. And I know numerous Christian families who, it's a huge debate that they're like, no, I don't think I'm going to, or is it the right thing to do? I just really loved how the book discussed how important that is, and it gave some really good takeaways from that and what you need to do and how you need to remember it. And I loved how it talked about that you need to be consistent with it. That's something that I believe to be important. It also talked about in the other chapters how consistency is crucial for everything. And sometimes that can be hard. I remember growing up, there were times that my parents had to discipline my sister and I, and they probably missed out on a lot of opportunities that they wanted to do. I remember, for instance, one time we were going to have a babysitter come over, and we loved the babysitter that we had because we always had so much fun with them. And my sister and I were not behaving, and my parents ended up canceling what they were going to do to stay home because that was a consequence of our actions. We got disciplined. I remember we were older, so we were past the age of being spanked. But so that's why we had a consequence different than spanking. But I just think it's really important that you're consistent with that. But back to spanking, I loved how it talked about that you need to take them to a private place, that not to embarrass them. I think that that's really crucial. And it also talks about telling them how many spankings that you're going to give them. And that's a great way to keep you accountable. That's kind of what the book was talking about, to keep you in check. But then after you spank them, you need to remind them that you do love them, and that's why you're doing this. And it's important for them to always know that they're loved. My parents did a really good job of this. Luckily, when I was reading this book, I realized how well my parents raised my sister and I, and how well they did it biblically, and they thought about our future. So overall, that was a really cool chapter to read. And then I also loved how it talked about when you're going into a situation with your children that you have to understand first what's going on with them and not telling them how you feel about the situation. So when they've done something wrong, that the first thing that you do shouldn't be like, I'm so mad at you for doing this makes me angry, or this hurts my feelings. That the first thing is that we understand, where are they coming from? Why are they doing this? And I think that leads back to the heart issue. I also really liked how it talked about how we are given these children and we're responsible for them, but ultimately they're God's. And that's a great reminder for us as Christian and as future parents that these are a gift to us, and that God is allowing us to be the ones responsible to raise them, and He's giving us the authority over them, and we really need to take that and listen to God and His guidance with it, and not just be like, oh, they're my kids, I get to do what I'm doing, and raise them how I want. We need to raise them how God has asked us to raise them, and how He's given us direction over them. Something else that really stuck with me was how it talked about how if they're not worshiping God, they're worshiping idols. And when you think about a 2-year-old, I don't necessarily think of them as worshiping an idol when they're doing, not following Christ. But I think it's important that even at that young of age, that we're pointing them to God, and that we're making them understand the importance of what we're doing, so that, taking them to church and talking about it with family. I also loved how at the beginning of the book it talked about influences and outside influences. That is something that's so important. And it's also important how we handle situations in our house. Our children may fail at times, and growing up, you make mistakes and you have to learn from them. But I just think that it's so important that they're in a situation where the influence that we're providing around them are pointing them straight to God. So overall, this book was really cool, and I'm really glad that I was able to read it.